The morning sun barely peeked through the dense fog as Ben Turner pulled his cap snugly over his graying hair. The quiet hum of the city awakening was something he had grown accustomed to after nearly 3 decades behind the wheel of his bus. To most passengers, he was just another driver, a figure who nodded silently as they dropped their coins into the fare box. But to Ben, every face that stepped onto his bus had a story, a struggle, a dream. And today, he carried a secret, one that would change lives in ways no one could predict. Ben's route took him through the heart of the city, from the rundown neighborhoods on the outskirts to the bustling financial district. He had seen it all: weary night shift workers, hopeful job seekers, children with too big backpacks, and the elderly clutching their bus passes like lifelines. He had always done his best to offer a smile, a kind word, or a steadying hand. But in recent weeks, he had been more than just a driver, he had become a quiet force of change. It all started one chilly evening when a little girl, no older than 7, boarded the bus with her mother. The woman's face was tired, her eyes filled with a quiet desperation that Ben recognized. He had seen that look before, in the mirror years ago, when he was struggling to provide for his own children. As the mother fumbled in her purse for coins, coming up short, Ben waved her off gently. "It's on me," he said with a wink. The woman hesitated, then nodded, gratitude shining in her eyes. That single act set off a chain reaction in Ben's heart. He began noticing things he had overlooked before: the teenager in tattered shoes who always rode in silence, the elderly man who counted his change 3 times before dropping it into the box, the young mother who always seemed a little too thin, her coat too worn for the season. And so, without anyone knowing, Ben started setting aside a portion of his own earnings to help his passengers. It wasn't much, sometimes just enough to cover a fare, sometimes a little extra for a cup of coffee or a warm meal, but it was something. Then came the day that would change everything. It was just past noon when a young man, barely out of his teens, stepped onto the bus. His hands trembled as he fumbled for his fare. His hoodie was pulled low over his face, but Ben could see the tears glistening on his cheeks. "Rough day?" Ben asked, his voice gentle. The young man nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah. Just lost my job. Got nowhere to go now." Ben didn't hesitate. "This ride's on me, son. And tell you what, why don't you sit up here for a bit?" The young man hesitated, then sank into the seat nearest Ben. As the bus rumbled on, Ben shared a few words of wisdom, little pieces of advice he had picked up over the years. He told him about the time he himself had been down on his luck, about the people who had helped him when he thought he had no one. "The world's got more kindness in it than you think," he said. "Sometimes, you just have to look in the right places." That conversation sparked something unexpected. The young man, inspired by Ben's words, decided to turn his life around. He reached out to a community center, found shelter, and eventually landed a new job. But what happened next was even more remarkable. Word of Ben's quiet generosity spread. One day, a group of his regular passengers surprised him at the bus stop with a small ceremony. They had collected donations, enough to match what he had given away over the years, and more. Tears filled Ben's eyes as he looked around at the faces that had become more than passengers. They were his people, his family. He had never done it for recognition, never expected anything in return. But in that moment, he understood something profound: kindness had a way of coming full circle. As he climbed back into the driver's seat, a note was pressed into his hand. It was from the young man he had helped, now thriving. It read simply, "You saved my life. Now, I'll spend mine paying it forward." Ben turned the key in the ignition, his heart full. The road ahead was the same, but somehow, everything felt different. The city, the people, the world, it all looked a little brighter. And maybe, just maybe, a simple bus driver could change the world after all.